Recently, I decided to return to Warcraft 3 and see how it feels in 2026. And I had a few questions in my head. Is the storyline actually cool? Did the game age well? Can I really enjoy it after so many years since its release? Will I actually get interested in the lore this time? Or will it just feel old? And now that I finished the original human campaign from Reign of Chaos, it feels like a good moment to pause for a second and reflect for the first time during this challenge. Therefore, in this video I wanna talk about the overall story arc, Arthas and the other main characters like Uther, Jaina and Muradin, what I think campaign does really well, and also where it does not convince me fully. This one is purely about story and characters. FYI, if you're more interested in gameplay and mission design, I made a separate video for that too. And yeah, small spoiler warning here. If you haven't played the human campaign yet and you care about the story, maybe save this one for later. Here's the plan. First, I'll just walk through the main events and refresh how everything goes in the campaign. After that, I wanna go back to the key moments and try to unpack them a bit more. Because I think the interesting part isn't just what happened, but also why and how it happened. So let's start from the beginning. It all begins with that council meeting in Lordaeron. The prophet suddenly appears and basically says, yes, things are about to go very badly. The plague is coming. You should probably leave the entire kingdom and sail west. I wonder why nobody takes him seriously. I mean, if someone appears out of nowhere and tells you to abandon everything because of some possible future disaster, you kinda get to it right away. Then we meet Arthas, young, confident, determined heir of the kingdom, fighting orc alongside legendary paladin Uther. At this point it still feels like classic fantasy, pretty straightforward. But slowly the tone shifts. Villages are infected, people are turning into undead, and when Arthas and Jaina discover that the grain shipments are the source, that's when it really clicked for me. It's no longer about defeating enemies, it's about something spreading quietly, something you can't just fight directly. And this motive of something dark spreading underneath is kinda the root of the whole human campaign. It happens not only in the obvious way, but also it happens for characters and their slow change. That's kinda cool, to be honest. Anyway, soon we reach Stratholme and have the culminative point of events. The grain has already been delivered, the people are infected, they will turn. And Arthas decides to purge the city. Uther refuses, Jaina refuses, and he just goes through with it. Which is not the usual thing you'd expect playing this kind of game. Normally you'd think there will be someone or something that blocks such decision and gets you to this happy ending. Not here though. And I appreciate it, not gonna lie. Arthas is left alone, but the plan goes on, and I remember thinking, okay, she just became heavy. After all that, it seemed there will be some time for a reset, possibly slowing down the action and putting more thought into everything that happened, for both the player and the game characters. But instead, the tension and the transformation of the campaign vibe starts to progress even faster. When Mal'Ganis challenges Arthas and tells him to come to Northrend if he truly wants to end this, Arthas doesn't hesitate. He goes, and in Northrend, something feels slightly different about him. He's calmer on the surface, but colder, more focused, almost detached. It told me a story of someone who is no longer in anger or in face of disappointed by his companions. It's someone who stays determined, but also accepts being left on his own to the very end. Then a message arrives from Lordaeron. The king has ordered the campaign to end and to return back home. And this is where the ship's mission happened. You might be surprised, but this one was very important in my opinion, because that's the moment of clarity. Our main hero does not stand before his army and say, "Listen, this is why we must continue." Instead of convincing them, he secretly destroys the ships and then blames the mercenaries. Which basically means there is no going back now, not for him, not for his men, both at the same time, but very different reasons. As the only direction left is forward, we continued forward. And forward leads to Frostmourne. Muradin warns Arthas that the blade is cursed, but Arthas still takes it. And at that point I remember thinking, okay, this is the very first direct proof that it became more about simple revenge. It wasn't that clear before. Finally, Arthas makes it. He defeated Mal'Ganis, but instead of relief, it feels empty and cold. And when he returns home and kills his father, it doesn't feel like a shocking twist anymore. It feels like the natural result of everything that happened before. And exactly the thing that story writers prepared us for. And now that we've refreshed the whole arc, let me rewind a bit and take a closer look at Arthas. Because that's really where everything starts to get complicated. I don't see him as purely wrong in Stratholme, but I don't see him as purely justified either. It feels understandable, and I know that this might be surprising, but hear me out for a little. Obviously, he was put into an impossible decision situation. Wouldn't want to be put in his shoes, not gonna lie. If he waits, the plague spreads. If he hesitates, more innocent people will possibly die. If he acts, he becomes the one ordering the death of an entire city. Of course, there is a lot of ifs here, and those are based on his current knowledge about the disease, let's say. But as a future king, hesitation could be even worse. In a crisis, people expect decisiveness. So in that sense, I understand him. Sacrificing one city to potentially save the entire kingdom is brutal, yes, but it's still a calculation made for the future. And at the same time, here's where I also start struggling with him. After all, leadership is not only about making hard decisions, but also about how you make them. Maybe even how is more important, actually. At the moment, he was not alone there. He had Uther there. He had Jaina there. And instead of even briefly consulting them, laying everything out, discussing options, he just declared the purge. It became, "This is my decision, follow me or leave." Such decision strikes as chaotic and made without putting much thought into it. It does not give a good impression. For the player at the very moment, it's interesting and exciting. Due to it being surprising, it also has this misdirection effect. I think I right away was thinking, man, what just happened here? It's a bit unnatural to think, okay, let's see how it happened. For Arthas, that's kinda where the isolation begins. So it also clearly shows how one rushed action can lead to big consequences. Especially when you're someone with that power. And then in Northrend it gets even clearer. Burning the ships isn't just desperation, but manipulation. Arthas removes choice from his own people. And once again, I gotta stress that we could focus on how the decision is made. When you think about it more, a true leader should be followed because people trust him, because they understand his reasoning, and because they want to follow. An army built on trust is powerful, but an army built on lies it seems fragile. And here Arthas stops leading through trust, he leads through control. And when he starts talking about vengeance, that's when something shifts totally. It's no longer about stopping the plague anymore or having doubts about his true motivations. Before it can be argued. However, from that moment of starting to thinking about vengeance for most, it becomes clearly personal. It becomes about defeating Mal'Ganis because of what he did. At first, Arthas' actions felt like, I will carry this burden so others don't have to, or something like that. Know what I mean? And later it starts to shift towards something more like, I need to justify everything I've done. and that change is what makes the ending feel inevitable. And I think it also makes it so cool and put me as a player into the mindset that I know it's far from over and that the consequences will be even greater. I was prepared to see and play through even more. And man, the game delivered. Anyway, we gotta talk even more about it. In the end, it's not all Arthas, you know. Let's check other characters because let's face it already, I think that no one is clean in this story. Maybe that's why I enjoy it as much and I can ramble about it for such a long time. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Arthas isn't the only one who failed here, and perhaps maybe not even the one that failed the most. Let's take a closer look on our legendary paladin Uther. Uther is powerful, respected and experienced, and because of that I have to say I expected more from him. He opposes Arthas, which makes sense, but he withdraws right away instead of fully stepping into any kind of leadership, which by the way he clearly has experience in. So he's not trying to prevent the outcome he's so sure will happen. For someone with that authority and trust already built, he feels extremely passive at critical moments. It's much different than for example with Jaina. Jaina just feels underdeveloped, she follows the authority, but gives this vibe of being promising. She shows calm thinking, she senses something deeper about the prophet, for example. Yeah, she mostly follows, which kinda makes sense. She's young, so I'm not disappointed in her. But Uther? Damn, that guy perfectly avoids the problems, if you know what I mean. How convenient. Honestly, what do you think? From the Stratholme mission, he has very few appearances and mentions which turned out to be rather judgmental or sometimes a bit ignorant as well. We also have the opportunity to meet Muradin, who is rather a classic mix of honorable and loyal fantasy-based dwarf. He sees that things are going wrong, but he still follows, and in the end he becomes another sacrifice. That's a bummer. I liked Muradin during the playthrough, but we haven't really seen more depth to him. On the other hand, not all characters need to present a big metamorphosis or something like that. I think we can agree that we all know what to expect from him, and during missions I wasn't surprised by his actions. And that leaves us with the Prophet. I like the concept, but to be honest, his approach feels naive for someone portrayed as wise and experienced. After beating the human campaign, I wonder if his brief appearances during the missions were actually that important. Will anything that happened change if he perhaps was not even there? You know, I would like to see him during the events, but from a different perspective. For example, trying to encounter the characters and sharing his point of view using some evidence, or also giving the solid reasons why he simply cannot be ignored. Appearing out of the blue in front of our characters seemed kinda doomed from the start. It's very weird during playing that a figure of probably such high position would behave in such a way. Almost like he doesn't believe from the start that it can bring any results. Unless it was the point. Because due to past experiences he might have, it might be assumed that it will not make a difference or humans will just stay to protect the kingdom no matter what. But just not to leave it in all thought sphere, he at least tries to talk with those in power to do anything about the plague. However, if the decision is to try, it would make sense to at least really try, not only check the checkbox. It still might be that we will learn more about his reasons and get more details later, so I will not make any final conclusions here. After all, I actually like that the story allows all of the characters to be flawed in their own way. No one is completely right, no one is completely wrong. It adds depth and creates a unique story that I still want to happily discuss after so many years and learn from it. And even though I've pointed out weaknesses, I really enjoyed this campaign. I love how slowly it escalates and how it does not start epic, but becomes epic slowly. also how it becomes darker with each mission, and it leaves space for interpretation. The game does not over-explain everything, which is also a plus. During playing, a lot can be read between the lines. It lets you think and leave the space to do so and come up with our own conclusions. And at the same time, it feels that it still works and gives results story writers wanted. It prepares us perfectly for the Undead campaign and sets the perfect tone along the way. We've seen the fall. Now I really want to understand the other side. And sure, it has flaws. The Prophet could feel more convincing, Uther feels passive at key moments, Jaina feels underused for now. The Undead and Mal'Ganis are still not deeply explored, but I'm sure that it will happen during the Undead campaign. And the shift toward explicit revenge feels slightly simplified compared to everything that happened earlier, and the earlier complexity, let's say. But still, the overall arc works, and it nicely built curiosity for the next campaigns. And before we finish the video, there's actually one thing that really surprised me. When I started analyzing the missions and gameplay side of the Human campaign, I was honestly impressed by mission design and how it fits the story and its tempo. It's done extremely well. So if you're curious about that side of things, I made a separate video where I focus entirely on the gameplay and mission structure. This separate video will be released next week. Finally, I just want to mention that this channel is basically my slow return to Warcraft 3 after 20 plus years. So if you're interested, I'd be happy if you joined the adventure. Right now I'm going through each campaign slowly on the highest difficulty and try to reflect on the story and the basics. After that, I want to properly learn one race that I choose as my main and eventually try multiplayer. No rushing, just learning it properly this time. Next up, we move into the Undead campaign, which after everything that happened here, I am honestly really curious about. And that would be all for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.